Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Please share your information via chat. Let's get to know each other. We've got a lot of new attendees today, so please tell us who you are and what you do, and we'll do a Q&A a little later in the broadcast. I'm delighted that Jill Whitty Collins, author of Why Men Win at Work, is our guest today. She's going to be talking about some things that are really important, and I'm very, very aligned with the mission of Purse Power. Many thanks also to Melanie Thompson-Stillinger and Mosaic Personnel for sponsoring the program today. We're in webinar format so that we can tape the program. And again, we've had up to 1,000 people watch the video after the fact. We're going to provide a chance for everybody to get to know each other personally on the 30th this month. So normally the fourth Friday of the month is our networking session. This month it's going to be on the 30th because of our guests. Please bring a friend with you. Again, the bigger this gets, the more beneficial it is to everyone. Let me start by talking about Purse Power. Purse Power is working to help women use their massive purchasing power to drive positive change. We believe that if women who make 80% of all purchasing decisions would choose to buy from the companies that actively promote women, and we would do that en masse, and if we could create a funding stream for battered women's shelters in the process, that we absolutely could shatter glass ceilings and change lives. So that's our mission here at Purse Power. We began the Let's Share the Journey calls at the beginning of the coronavirus, and our intention is to connect you with each other, connect you with national leaders, and just really support you during this difficult time. And then I would just want to shout out for any of my shareholders who are on the call today. Thank you for being here. Okay, so I'll introduce Melanie, who's going to introduce Jill. Please, again, share your comments via chat as we go, and ask your questions by clicking on a questions link, and we'll be looking at those a little later in the broadcast. And so let me go ahead and start by introducing Melanie. So I've known Melanie for years, and she is the Vice President of Mosaic Personnel. She began her career many years ago providing recruitment solutions to clients across the United States. So she is a recruiter, and she provides human resources support. She is an advisor and partner to businesses and human resources leaders across the US. And she's also on a number of boards and has been recognized as being an HR professional and a half. She's gotten an Excellence in HR award. She received the HR Legend Award, and she was also recognized during Women's History Month. So Melanie's wonderful. I really appreciate Mosaic Personnel sponsoring the program today. And let me go ahead and turn it over to Melanie.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you for giving our team at Mosaic the opportunity to sponsor. It's my pleasure to introduce Jill Whitty Collins. She's here with us from Geneva, so it's quite a treat. Jill spent 26 years with Procter & Gamble, running global brands such as Olay, Always, and Pantene. Jill was born near Liverpool as the youngest of 3 sisters, and after attending a local comprehensive school, a love of language and steely determination took Jill to study modern and medieval languages at Selwyn College at Cambridge University. Upon graduating with a baby son in tow, she joined Procter & Gamble, where she quickly progressed through the ranks, earning a reputation as a world-class brand architect and business renovator. Jill thrived in the highly competitive business environment, and her success in business saw her move swiftly up the career ladder to marketing director, general manager, and finally to senior vice president. This was when she started to see the impact of gender diversity issues on women and their careers, and saw how it's affecting and defeating talented women everywhere. What Jill has experienced, witnessed, and learned about gender equality as a woman in senior management will resonate with people, whatever their gender, wherever they are working. She now works to drive gender equality and diversity as a key lever to build stronger businesses and stronger societies. Her story and vision will inspire you to join the force to make inequality history. Jill, we're glad to have you.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you for having me. Delighted to be talking with you today.
This is going to be an amazing program. I'm excited about this. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first of all, we all want to get to know you. Please give us a little bit of a background and how you arrived at this place in your life and career.
Yeah, so, as Melanie said, I was born near Liverpool in the UK in the north of England. I was the third of 3 sisters, went to a mixed comprehensive school. And, my parents, my school experience, my childhood gave me absolutely no reason to question whether or not I was equal to any boy or man. I just didn't even occur to me that this was a thing. And I felt like that for a very long time. I felt like that for, you know, well into my career, 20 plus years into my career. And it was really only at the senior vice president level when I reached that point where I entered a male dominant culture for the first time in my career, first time in my life, actually. And I know I was really lucky because I hit a male dominant culture very late, relatively. I know some women hit male dominant cultures much sooner. People who work in obviously different businesses, different types of industries. So I was consider myself really lucky that that it hadn't hit me. But once I got to that experience and I found myself in board meetings and exec meetings, and it was 80% men, I really absolutely clearly felt the impact of that. I felt the impact on me, but I could also see the impact it was having on the women around me. I could see that it was they weren't the same women as they were outside that culture, in a more balanced culture. These they were, it made them smaller. It made them smaller. Yeah. And so I became, I saw it and I felt it and I became absolutely fascinated by it. That was my response, fascination. So I read a lot of stuff. I really immersed myself, read books, articles, everything. And then obviously I realized the extent. I realized, my goodness, this is not about me, and it isn't about the women around me, and it isn't about these men, and it isn't about this company. It's everywhere, every country, every company, every organization. It's happening everywhere. No matter how equal it starts out, look at the top levels, you'll see 90% plus men up there. Absolutely. So having seen that and really seen the data and thought, wow, how does 50% of the world's population and intelligence and capability become less than 10% of its leadership? And so I made myself a promise at that point that when I left that job, the first thing I would do would be to write a book about it all and share what I'd learned, but also not just over the facts and the figures. I think everyone knows them, but why? Why does it happen?
Yes. Well, that's the next question. What are these invisible forces, pardon me, that are causing this, and what do we do about it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the issue, isn't it? Is they are, so many of them are invisible, and they therefore difficult to see. They're also unconscious, mostly, and unintended. So a lot of this stuff is happening despite the fact that I do believe the world is generally full of good, decent men with good intentions who aren't trying to build the patriarchy and destroy women. I really don't believe most men are trying to do that. So there are many forces at play getting in the way, which make us believe that men are stronger, better performers, and make us choose them 9 times out of 10 for the big jobs. So many of them, and you know, some of the ones I talk about, the invisible power of culture, you know, this, you know, when, for example, you're in a male dominant culture, if you're a man, you're more likely to feel included, belonging, relaxed, comfortable, and therefore be able to just perform, just focus on performing. Whereas if you're a woman in that environment, you're just not going to have that inherent sense of inclusion and belonging. You're not going to feel relaxed. You're not going to feel comfortable. You are literally going to perform less well than you could in an environment that was, you know, a culture that you were, you know, more comfortable in. So there's that whole culture dynamic that actually affects our performance, but also affects the perception of our performance, because you've got the whole dynamic, that almost irresistible dynamic, isn't it, of trying to fit in. If you find yourself in a culture and you look around and you think, I don't really belong here, you try to fit in, and then you're not yourself, and you're not leveraging your strengths, and you're not authentic. So it's a horrible spiral. And then the invisible force of the competence versus confidence equation. People talk about this a lot, and you know, the fact that we are drawn to confidence. We do like confident people. We trust confident people, but generally, and it's a generalization, but generally, for lots of reasons that start in childhood, women are less confident than men. So often we draw a conclusion that hey, this confident man is great, when actually there is a more competent woman who's just projecting less confidence, or not projecting confidence at all. One of my favorite not favorite forces is what I call the umbrella theory, which is this general belief that women have, that there is a myth of meritocracy, and that if I just do my work really well, that should be enough, and men generally being much more savvy, that's absolute nonsense, and that the world doesn't work like that, and you have to not just do the work, but make the work visible, make yourself visible. And I always talk about this as if we're all under umbrellas, as working under umbrellas as far as our bosses are concerned. And if we never push aside the umbrella and say, hey, boss, can I share my work with you and get your input? Our boss may absolutely have no clue how brilliant that work is. And women get very, very frustrated because they see people getting jobs and promotions that they think they deserve, which went to people who were much more savvy about showing what was going on under their umbrella. So, I mean, so many forces, I could talk all day about them, but they all kind of combine for me into this. I call it the invisible ceiling, because I don't think it's glass, because, as I always say, I can see glass. And I can bash glass and I can break glass. Invisible is much more difficult to get our heads down, but we absolutely can. We just have to put a bit of work in.
Okay, I'm going to mix up the questions a little bit, because I think the next question is actually about how do you promote yourself? Because there's this conundrum women are in where they need to promote themselves or what they're doing, but they are looked at negatively sometimes when they do. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's the umbrella theory, right? And I think it's the first thing I would say to all women is just accept it. It's a human reality. I don't think it's ever going to change that decisions about who gets jobs and who gets promotions and who gets projects will never just be spreadsheet decisions. They will always be also human decisions, and people they give positions and opportunities to people they know and trust. So you have to get out from under that umbrella. But to your question, I know a lot of women do feel really uncomfortable with that, and that's conditioned into us from a very young age. That's a whole other thing. Right. And the advice that I give is, well, firstly, we should truly try not to care. I think we should absolutely try not to care so much about being likable. But a practical tip is think about it as talking about the work, not about yourself. So think about it as, this is not about having a coffee with my boss to tell them how great I am, which may feel extremely awkward. This is a coffee with my boss to share my work, to share where I'm up to get input, to see if I'm missing anything, to be able to incorporate my boss's experience and thinking into it, to make it stronger, to make my work stronger so that my work can be further reaching. If you reframe it as about the work, sometimes that can helps. Be helpful. You are actually harming your work by keeping it invisible under the umbrella. Yeah. And to most women, their work's really, really important to them. They put a lot into it and they don't want it to be lost. So I think that can help.
That's great.
We absolutely should not, and we do, but we should not think negatively about women who do, put themselves forward and market themselves. It is an inequality in itself, right? We totally accept men doing it. And by not accepting women doing it and making a woman feel uncomfortable for doing it, we are just perpetuating the inequality ourselves. So that's got to stop as well. It's on the list of things that have got to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. So I care about this deeply, and I have for years and years, and I support women every day. But I remember seeing a woman on a stage one time promoting herself, and I didn't like her at all. And in that moment, I thought, okay, would I be reacting the same way if this was a man up there doing it? And I went, no, I wouldn't. So we kind of need to challenge our own assumptions and our own reactions sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, good for you for asking that question. I think it's it's one of the first ones I always ask people when they say to me, but this one was doing this. I always say, would you be saying this if it was a man? And 9 times out of 10, if they're honest with themselves, no, they wouldn't.
Right. We've got to make this unconscious bias conscious. for
Yes,
people to do something
exactly.
about it.
We
Yeah.
can't help the unconscious bias. We've been programmed since birth by everything we've seen on our screens to believe that women should behave a certain way and men behave a certain way. We can't help that. That happened to us when we were babies, but we can, you know, we can make it conscious, and we can choose to do something with it that isn't just to allow it to sweep us on the path to inequality that we're already on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So one of the things that I found interesting in your book was the difference between men's and women's brains and the implications of that. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm not a scientist, as you know, Donna. I'm the opposite of a scientist. So there's the science bit in the book is very much stuff that I've learned from other people, and a huge amount of it is from Luann Brisendine's book, The Female Brain, which I know is controversial. There are some people who absolutely don't buy it at all, but I have to say it really resonated with me. And I thought, you know, of course, this isn't true for all women, and it's not true for all men, but I kind of buy the argument of, you know, on the spectrum, it may be more likely for some genders to be certain ways and others to be others. So she talks about a lot of stuff, but I find it fascinating. I mean, one of them is the amygdala, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is the brain's fear center, is more easily activated generally in women than in men. So when a woman faces stress or conflict, for example, even in the workplace, it resonates literally, physically, biologically resonates more deeply. There's a sudden change in serotonin and dopamine that's created. And it's a sudden change, which actually is like a kind of mini brain seizure. So, you know, if you think about it, you know, sometimes, you know, us thinking women maybe generally don't seem to like being in conflict situations as much as men. Well, you know, if we're having a mini brain seizure, it's hardly surprising, is it? So I think that's super interesting. I think, you know, the obvious one is estrogen versus testosterone. Estrogen is obviously the main female hormonal driver, and it's linked with encouraging bonding, connection, sensitivity, collaboration, and an aversion to confrontation and risk-taking. Those are, you know, estrogen qualities, which generally women obviously have more on. Testosterone, the male hormonal driver, men have 10 times more of it than women, generally. It's linked to aggression, hierarchy, risk-taking, power demonstration. It drives confidence, and confidence makes them seem more trustworthy. So I just think this is so interesting because, you know, neither of these are good or bad. Neither of these hormones and their effects are good or bad, but the problem is that we associate the male ones, the testosterone ones, we associate that with leadership, and the other ones we associate less with leadership. So it's just constantly reinforcing our perception of, with all the other forces, oh, the men are just better, they're just better leaders. Testosterone, you know, testosterone, we love, it's proven that we all love the deep male voice. You know, we talk about gravitas. The gravitas. It's absolutely true that people listen to and respond more to a deeper voice. What drives a deep voice? Testosterone. Who's got the testosterone? Not the women. So, I mean, as I said, I'm not a scientist. A lot of people don't agree with this stuff, but I think, I don't know, there's something in all that for me. There is something in all that for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because the Pew Research Center has said that men and women see men and women as being equally competent leaders. But to your point about the male leadership behaviors, that's what looks leader-like to us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, that shows up. The place it shows up more obviously is in the meeting room, right? In the meeting room, where so many judgments are made, you know, particularly as you get more senior in your career, you know, your boss is not looking at your work all the time. You're being judged by your performance in the meeting. And so many of these more masculine traits, potentially some of them driven by testosterone, show up so much better in the meeting.
Yeah.
It doesn't, as you say, have anything to do with how competent or how intelligent or how much value an individual has to add. It's literally that, that performance that we're drawn to, potentially falsely. Not always. Sometimes that's a really competent man, but sometimes maybe less so, but we're kind of fooled by it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, it's interesting. I'm an executive coach. Okay. So one of the things that people want is to learn about executive presence. And this is a piece of it. So we don't have deep voices. So do you have any insights on what kind of behaviors women can exhibit that will help them, for example, in meetings?
Yeah, one of the biggest things for me is what I'm really not into. I'm just not one of those women who's going to say to women, you need to change, right? I honestly think the answer to this is we've got to get more women in those situations. We've got to see more women in those situations, which includes on our screens, by the way. The media have got a massive role to play, and we've got to just reprogram our minds, and certainly program the minds of our children, that leadership is just as likely to look like this woman and sound like this woman as it is to look and sound like this man. I think we've got to start recognizing leadership, whatever gender it is, whatever color it is, whatever it speaks like, wherever it's from.
Right.
So, ultimately, I absolutely do agree with that. But I think the one thing I would say to women is, I'm not asking you to change, and certainly trying to be a man and trying to do a man's way. It's not going to work. It's not going to be authentic.
Right.
People can smell inauthenticity. They're not going to like it. But what I would say is the key, I think, is to bring yourself, but bring absolutely 100% yourself, which means spending that time to understand your own strengths. What are your, I'm a huge fan of Strengths Finder. I think it's fantastic. What are your strengths? What are your unique talents? What are your superpowers? And really believing them, finding that, I call it the confident core. What is your confident core? That is, what, no matter who challenges me, I know I'm really good at this stuff. And when you go into those situations, when you go into those meetings, don't try and do it the way they're doing it, but just speak from there. Speak from those strengths, speak from that confident, work from that confident core. And when you do that, people will feel your confidence, because it's genuine, because you genuinely feel confident when you're coming from there. So, that is the big advice, but clearly it's very, very real. Women, in a male dominant culture, the meeting is male dominant. Men win in that environment, and women find it much, much harder. There is data that proves that men are multiple times more likely to interrupt women in meetings than men. So it's a very, very real thing. And unfortunately, women have to work extra hard to be heard in that situation. And that's not the way it should be at all.
Well, the other thing we could do is cooperate with each other. I understood that Obama's staff, the women came together and they would point out each other's points and reinforce what was being said, so that everybody got that it was coming from a woman. I mean, any other ideas like that about how to appear more confident, to your point, and get the attention you need?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally reinforce that one. I think, I think one of the things that happens is, I think a lot of women don't realize this is going on almost until too late, or until afterwards. All of these dynamics are so much clearer to me as I look back on them now than they were when I was in there. So I think if I could have my time again, it's absolutely one of the things that I would do is I would call the women together and I would say, do you see what happens in these meetings? Here are some things that we can do to basically turn the volume up on, basically, compensate for the fact that we don't have the booming testosterone filled voice, and we maybe don't have that same ability for whatever reason, or confidence to hold the floor for 20 minutes. And that we do get a little bit upset when we get interrupted, and we maybe even get a bit emotional. And we do get a bit upset when we hear the point we made that got completely ignored, reiterated. So I think getting women together is a fantastic idea, but you've got to be so conscious that it's happening in order to do that. The other thing that I love when I see it, and I just think it's brilliant and we should all do it, is the when somebody intervenes and says, on your behalf, you were interrupted. I'd really like to hear the rest of what you were going to say. I think that's so powerful because, you know, when we say it about ourselves, it always feels a bit weedy, doesn't it? I've been interrupted. Can I finish my point? It doesn't really, I don't think it's very difficult to come across well. But when somebody says it on your behalf, when somebody says you were interrupted, I really like to hear the end of that. It's just so much more powerful. And I think women can do it for other women. I also think it's amazing when men do it. I think when a man does it, I could just kiss him. I just kiss them when they do it. Because what I love about it is it simultaneously gets the floor back for you. It builds your credibility because it's a statement of, I think you're interesting.
What she said.
I want to hear it. And bonus points, it also makes the person who interrupted you look a little bit ridiculous. So I think I love that. I wish we all did more of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, we can always strategize, right? We could even strategize with our male allies if it's something that's going on in our culture.
Exactly. I think it's just that point, isn't it? Is being conscious enough of what's happening to us to do that before it's too late.
Yeah. And you've talked a little bit about confidence. We've also talked about the kind of likability and competence kind of trap. Could you talk about that for a minute, just to raise people's awareness of it?
Yeah, so I have a chapter in the book called The Cruel Bit, which is kind of at the end, which is the harshest thing of all here is that even when we do understand why men win at work and all the things that happen and the things that men also do well that we can learn from, if women actually try and do that, that doesn't work because they're not liked for it. So, we know, for example, that we all know there's a huge salary gap, right? I think on average it's 17% wherever you look. But we know that women who try to ask for a pay rise are seen really negatively, whereas with men it's completely accepted. So that's kind of cruel, isn't it? And then there's I think it was one of the McKinsey and Lean In studies, which found that women who negotiate for promotion, so women who try to put themselves forward for promotion just in exactly the same way as a man would do, are 30% more likely to be called bossy and aggressive and overly ambitious than men. And then, we've been talking about meetings and the fact that men, they do generally have a much higher share of voice in meetings. But when a man speaks up in meetings, and he's evaluated, his competence ratings go up. And when a woman speaks up in meetings, her competence rating goes down.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
So, there's just all sorts of stuff. And again, it's just this, it reinforces really trying to do it the man way isn't the answer because it doesn't work. We've got to do it our own way. But what it means is you have women in this constant state of trying to avoid being unlikable or or criticized, and that makes us small. It makes women small. We make ourselves smaller. We allow all of this to make us smaller. We don't show up as we can because these forces are telling us, you won't be liked if you do that. And I think ultimately the answer on competence versus likability is, we've got to get to the point, as we've said, where we just stop thinking like this. We're so used to seeing women in these positions speaking up that we stop thinking, oh, women shouldn't be like that. But I think in the meantime, unfortunately, because we're a million miles from that, I think women have just got to say, I'm going to just suck it up and I'm going to do it, because otherwise we're perpetuating it, aren't we, for the next generation? if we just keep playing the role of, okay, I won't ask for that because that's not going to be likable, and I won't negotiate for that because they're going to call me this. We just add another generation of consolidation of this is how women are and this is how men are. So unfortunately, I think we're the generation who needs to stick our chins out and take it, and hopefully the future generations will benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I told you that we went to the march in Washington, D.C. and gave out these buttons that said, "Purse power, we have it, let's use it." And what I heard from the women there was, I can't believe we're still talking about this. I can't believe we're still talking about this over and over and over again. And to your point, I mean, part of the reason why we've got the woman and the girl that are superheroes on our website is because I do believe it is time for us to take on the tough stuff to really drive change, get this thing to change.
I know.
I want to talk to you about women too, and women supporting women. So part of it for me is if we would come together, if we would support each other, we can do this. We've got all the power we need if we'll act together. But there's still some unconscious biases by women too about women.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of what you were saying.
Sisters are not doing it for themselves. So that's one of my chapters. You know, I'm with you on this. I feel so strongly about this. First, I would say we've all had amazing women in our lives, and we have amazing women in our lives who absolutely are in the sisterhood and they support us, right? And we support them, and there are amazing women out there who do that. But I think the problem is pretty much all of us would say that at some point, at least one time in their careers, they've come across the senior woman who's made it, and it absolutely is not supporting other women. They're not holding the ladder down, or they're shaking it frantically. So, you know, you can't cling on. And I think it happens for lots of reasons. I'm not even sure of all the reasons why it happens. I think a lot of them actually come down to some sad reasons about how confident is that woman, and also potentially her scarcity mindset of there's only room for one special woman around here, and it's going to have to be me. There's no room for you. So I empathize with why it may happen, but it's got to stop, right? Because if we think about it, we've got men up there with 90% plus of the leadership positions, and then we get the occasional woman who battles through and makes it. The men who get up there, one of the things that they do, and often unconsciously, is they support other men. They support their mini-me's. They promote their mini-me's. And then if you've got the women who've made it up there and they're not doing that, they're actually doing the opposite, which is shaking the ladder and, you know, pushing the women off. It's just reinforcing the self-fulfilling prophecy. How are any other women going to get up there? And I think the other thing about this is it's embarrassing. Men see this. I've got so many men who say to me, we see this, you know, we see this dynamic between senior women. We see the not supporting each other, and we kind of think that's really uncool. It makes them think less of women, so that's embarrassing. And you know, I think the big thing I would say to women is, you know, to those women who are up there or on their way up there, is please remember this, because you know there are lots of dynamics going on, and again, lots of things programming us maybe to feel this and maybe to feel threatened by other women, but actually it's not real. You know, in business, in work, in the workplace, yes, there's competition. Yes, our colleagues are sometimes our competition, and even our reports, our employees may sometimes be our competition, but the women are no more competition than men are. The men are competition too, so a disproportionate non-supporting of women is illogical. But again, it's what you said, Donna. We've got to make this conscious, because unconsciously these things will happen. So we have to make them conscious and say, no, I'm not going to allow myself to do that. That's ridiculous. I'm going to intervene and do the much more logical, rational thing, which is to support women. And by the way, potentially disproportionately, because they've got all sorts of forces to overcome. So if they've made it to this point, they're probably pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I think that some of the people that make it to the top in all of these groups are really, really good people, or they wouldn't have been able to get there.
Exactly.
They had a lot of headwinds to get there. All right, you guys, I want you to start putting your questions in the Q&A box. I'm going to ask her another one, and then it's your turn. All right, so you have lots of to-dos in your book about young girls and young women and how we can help them. What are the top 3 things we need to be doing to support the next generation of women?
So I do. I have a massive to-do list in the book, as you know. It ends with
Yes.
a huge to-do list for everyone, actually: parents, teachers, media makers, managers, employers, women, men, and obviously in the context of girls as well. And I think so much to say to young girls and young women, but probably the biggest first one would be aware, and get yourself aware as early as you can, because I got aware too late. And you know, if you're lucky, and I know many of you are, you've had parents and an upbringing who which has made you feel confident and feel like you're the equal to anyone. And that's fantastic, but sometimes it doesn't prepare girls for the reality of the workplace, which is that's not going to play out for very long. So I think just that awareness of this is an issue, and you may not have seen it yet, and you're lucky if you haven't, but at some point, if you do progress in your career, you will see it at some point. So just being aware of that, because, you know, being aware, being ready, being prepared means that our girls will manage it better when it happens. I would love to say to our girls, we're sending you into a world of equality. I think we all know we're a long way away from that. We may not be even sending our granddaughters into equality. So I think just awareness will help. I would have managed things better if I'd been more aware. I think the second thing, I'd come back to this strengths thing. I think to girls and to anyone who's sending girls out into the world, get them to do that exercise as early as you can. I mean, really, even as a teenager, it's already there, those strengths. Do Strengths Finder or something like that, where you really identify the strengths, the superpowers, the unique talents, the things that, you know what, I can go out into the world knowing I'm phenomenal at these, I'm world class at these, and that will give me a confidence. And it's just that confident core that says, do you know what, I expect these are talents, these are strengths, I expect them to be valued and leveraged, and if they're not valued and leveraged, I'll take them somewhere else. Just
Right.
having that,
Right.
you know, just that literally that confident core, and to do that, I think we send our girls out in too many instances with that you know, that fragility on that front. So there's a kind, there is a confidence, but it's fragile, and it can get broken by the dynamics, these invisible forces in the workplace. But the stronger the confident core is, the more that won't happen. And then I guess the third one I would say is just really, really remember that umbrella theory, and teach every girl, you know, every young woman, you know, the umbrella theory, because I can tell you, I've had women in their 40s who've looked like scales were falling from their eyes, and I said, that you're so right, that is what it is. And I think the sooner young women are aware of that, this is the reality of how the workplace works, it's not going to change, just doing the work isn't enough. Make sure you're not just working under your umbrella, you're coming out from the umbrella, making your work visible, making yourself visible, making yourself known. I think that's one of the most important things that they need to literally just getting started on that from day one in their careers, rather than age 45 like I did, which is possibly a little too late.
I love that. I've never heard that before, the umbrella theory. I mean, that really does make a whole lot of sense. And to your point about talking about your work, I just want to give you an update, boss. This is what I've been working on. Give me some feedback on how it's going, and using that as the way to talk about what you're contributing and what you're accomplishing, I think is excellent.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about, make it about the work.
Yeah.
And it will just feel a lot more comfortable. And by the way, in my experience, that's what the men are doing. We may have this perception that, oh, you know, he's schmoozing again in the coffee area, and we, in our minds, he's talking about his wonderfulness. Actually, from what I've seen, that's not what's happening. He's talking about the work. He's sharing the work. And I think too many women are like, well, I'm just getting on with the work. And by the way, maybe I don't have time, because there is the whole time issue, right? Women are generally carrying more of the unpaid work at home, which does leave them less time for all of this stuff. The men they're sharing the work, and that's making it's not just making the boss say, that's great work, I'll remember that. It's also making the boss feel good, because the boss feels like you want his input to the work. They're
Right.
human beings. They want to feel part of it. So yeah, I do. I do feel. I would love. I'd love to be able to, give some coaching to every young woman before she goes into the workplace and just teach her all this stuff. Best I can do is get her to read the book.
Yeah. We've got to really make it clear for people to see this. And this, our generation of women needs to help the young women understand all this coming into it.
Help them see it in advance, because they will see it eventually. But if they can see it in advance, they can get ahead of it.
And also, back to the coaching perspective, it's useful to role play so that when you hit that roadblock, you're ready for it. You know what you're going to do or how you're going to handle it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. And you know, if you've run through a scenario in advance, you're less emotional about it when it happens, because you've literally rehearsed it emotionally. You've rehearsed it. And that's important, because I do think remember the estrogen versus the testosterone. I have, and every woman I know, amazing, brilliant women, has been caught out by emotion in a stressful moment, where the emotion has taken, and maybe it was anger, which has manifested itself as tears. But the more you can rehearse a scenario in your mind and heart, the better you'll manage it.
Absolutely. I want to give people a tip. One of the things that will stop you from crying if you're feeling like crying is to look at the ceiling. It helps. And it's interesting. I had a boss that was being difficult, and I did that, and he thought I was rolling my eyes at him. And I thought that was better than crying.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a dream that one day it will be, if we really get to the gender equality paradise, we would be in a world where it would be as legitimate to behave as women naturally behave, as men naturally behave. And maybe in a few hundred years it'll be perfectly normal to cry in meetings. We're a long way away from that, I think.
Yeah. All right. Carla Thomas is asking, what are 3 specific things you've done in a meeting with men that has changed the direction of that meeting when the man is directing the conversation?
This is really difficult, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have always handled this well. One of the reasons that I talk about this is that this whole issue is that, despite having been a senior vice president and having had a career of 26 years and managed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and many businesses and fixed many businesses, I still found the male dominant meeting extremely difficult to cope with, because it just, to me, it was, I was doing and saying and being exactly as I'd always been, that had always made me very successful in everything that I'd done. And it just didn't have the same impact in that environment. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not the person who's going to sit here and say, these are the 3 things, that you need to do. But yeah, what I would reinforce is, I think for me, what's helped, going back to my confident core, and just, really taking that moment to say, just, okay, what really are my, my strengths here? What do I really know? What do I know that I know and can do better than anyone in this room, any gender? Going back to there and really thinking about, because, sometimes you can get a bit frantic, and it's not about chipping in and talking for the sake of talking. What can I contribute on that I know is really valuable, because I know that it's absolutely my strength. I think another thing that I have done, which you mentioned, I have done it for others, has been the noticing that somebody has been shut down or not properly listened to, or their point hasn't really registered, and I've gone back to it. I've gone back to them, and I've said, I'm going to say Julie. I'm going to make up the name Julie. Julie, this is exactly what you were saying before, wasn't it? You were talking about that example, and I've done that. And I've had that done for me. So I think things like, and I think the one thing that hasn't worked, and that I wouldn't do again, but again was driven by emotion, was can I please finish my point? Because that's exactly how I felt, but
Yeah.
I think anything like that, it diminishes our power, doesn't it?
Right, and then we get labeled too.
Yeah, you need someone else to say that for you. But it's super, super hard. The biggest thing though, I would say, is the problem here is this is not for the person who's being interrupted or not listened to fix. That isn't the answers. Yeah, we can have some tips. It just shouldn't be happening. And really the biggest thing that we need to do, and I would absolutely mandate it if it was up to me, if I was CEO of a company, would be that every meeting, meeting of a significant group would have a chairperson. There would be a chairperson, and that would be a skilled chairperson who knew how to make sure that they were getting the best out of everyone in the meeting and that everyone was being listened to. And that isn't just all genders, but all styles as well, right? We all know that there are extroverts who think while they talk, and there are introverts who like to think first. A brilliant chair will know all this stuff, and they'll make sure that they get all of the diversity of inputs out, and they just won't allow anybody to dominate anybody else, or one group to dominate another. So that's the specific thing that I have done and I would do, is just always put a chair in there.
That knows what they're doing. That's an interesting point. I mean, because if you were to look at leadership development in these large companies, this ought to be one of the factors that they're taught on, that they're trained how to do.
Yeah.
Because they're all leading meetings.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing though, that the chair, it's very difficult for the chair if they're part of the dominant group, unless they're extremely aware and they're really into all this stuff. So because they literally won't notice it. You don't notice a culture when it's your culture, right? The goldfish in the bowl.
Sure.
You ask the goldfish in the bowl, how's the water? And the goldfish says, what water? So yeah, I would absolutely have a chair, but really think very carefully about who the chair should be. And ideally it would be somebody who is going to really understand the dynamics of the non-dominant group, because then they're in the non-dominant group themselves.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. All right. Jane Beckendorf is saying, do you feel that expressing your passion shows confidence? Now, it's interesting because I think that it can be read a couple of different ways. When women are passionate, we can be seen as emotional. But why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, this one's close to my heart. So I was called too passionate when I was working. Obviously, I'm working now. When I was employed by a large company, I was called too passionate by a very senior person. And I really thought a lot about this. I was trying to understand, what does this mean? And I asked, what does this mean? And nobody could actually tell me what this meant. And then after a lot of thinking about it, I came to the conclusion, well, how can that actually be possible? How can it be possible to be too passionate about your work or your brand or your business? How can that be possible? And I think it's ridiculous, by the way. And I just think, I think we should challenge it if we ever hear it. I think if we ever hear if you ever hear the word to something, it usually means that a woman has stepped out of her traditional expected role and behavior, and it's kind of infringing upon somebody else's territory. So yeah, too passionate. Do I think, in my experience, is passion seen as competence? No. I don't understand why not, though. To me, if I see a passionate person, I think that's fantastic. I don't understand how it can possibly be a negative. I just don't get it.
Hey, and if any of you guys have comments on this or insights on this, please put them in the chat, okay? All right, interesting. Yeah, it's a conundrum, but I think that also women supporting each other, looking for opportunities for each other, putting each other forward every chance we get. I mean, we've got more power as women together if we'll just use it. And I mean, that's the thing. When people say we need a seat at the table, I say we own the table. You know, if we just realize we own the table,
I
we've got
know.
more power together.
We could just seize that table, couldn't we? We could
Yes.
actually just seize it, as you say. I think it's fascinating that we accept this inequality. Then that's the most interesting thing of all, is that women, we know all this stuff. You know, women, we know we're half the population. We know we're as intelligent. We know we're as capable. We know that men are running the world. We know that men are running the businesses, and we keep letting it happen. I think that's really, really interesting. Why do you? I think it's probably because we're so blooming busy. Women are so busy; they haven't got the time potentially to engage with it. But we should. It would be a much
for our
better
daughters,
world.
if not for ourselves, right? For our daughters or the young women coming after us,
Exactly.
if not for
For
ourselves.
everyone, men will win from this as well. I mean, that's the big thing about the book. It's called Why Men Win at Work, but the irony of it is they're not really winning. They're not really winning if they're winning in a workplace that. Thank you for the book flash. You know, if they're winning in a workplace that's actually not performing, not delivering results that are as strong as it could be if it was being run by a more equal and diverse group, then he's not really winning, is he? And by the way, so many men tell me that, you know, they want to be more equal. They would love to be more equal at home and in the family, but their employer is not enabling that for them. So everyone's going to win from this.
Absolutely. All right, we got another question, then we're going to have to close up the session here. So Dolores Otflo, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, says a male leader once said to a large group meeting, experience can be baggage, which was intended to encourage the mostly younger male audience, but gave permission for bad behavior, in my view. So experience can be baggage.
I don't think I understand that. I agree that experience can be baggage. I don't understand why that would encourage younger, mostly male, or younger, I guess. I absolutely think experience can be baggage. Or put more positively, I don't think we should necessarily always value experience over potential. And I think experience is the fact that we do overvalue experience when we make decisions about who gets a job or who gets a promotion, is one of the drivers of inequality, because so often you will hear that the decision was made on, you know, there was a younger, highly talented, you know, really exciting woman, but she just didn't have any or as much experience in this specific area, whereas the older, more experienced man did. And I think in that instance, you know, if you always value the experience, the self-fulfilling prophecy is just going to keep fulfilling itself again, isn't it?
You also won't get innovation.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see actually that the that thought of I would agree with it if I can reframe it as don't necessarily value experience over talent and potential.
Okay,
but so I would say that in saying that is as encouraging to younger women as it is to younger men.
Yeah, absolutely. So she's talking about he was encouraging big moves and bolding the testosterone, didn't encourage teaming.
Okay. I mean, I think the whole big moves and testosterone is interesting, isn't it? Because we again, it's something we value, right? We have a natural tendency to value the risk taker and to see women as generally less likely to take risks and do less of that hit the stuff out of the ballpark stuff. But, you know, actually the data says that, for example, women fund managers perform more strongly on average than male fund managers because they don't take those testosterone fueled risk-taking decisions, which look very exciting and dramatic, but over time that's not necessarily the smartest
best choice
strategy. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. Well, good comment. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the questions. Okay, so we're running out of time. So I need you to kind of summarize for us the most important things you wanted us to learn from you and any specific actions you want us to take as a result of what we learned.
I think, yeah, the biggest thing I would love you to take away is this isn't going to happen naturally. Gender equality isn't going to happen naturally. You know, every few weeks, the UN updates how many hundreds of years it's going to take us to get to equality. And I think it's nonsense, to be honest, because I think that we're stuck now. We have a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we don't change some serious things, it will take till eternity to get to gender equality, not 136 years. So I think just that big, I do think a lot of people see it as, hey, we're making progress and it will just naturally happen. I could not disagree with that more. I don't think we're making progress. We've got 7% CEOs are women, 9% heads of state. I think it's pathetic progress, if any. And it's not going to happen naturally. So we need manual interventions. And I would love to see things. I've come absolutely to believe in 50-50. I think we need to see employers and organizations committing to 50-50 at every level, recruitment right the way up. We just need to not accept it. I think as women, we need to not accept it. As employers, we need to not accept it. If you can't find 50% women, the problem isn't the women. The problem is you. So, look harder and look in a better way, because I can promise you the women are there. And as women, don't accept it. We are 50% of the population. We are equal. We need to stop accepting that the world is being run by men. And I don't say that in a men-hating way at all. I say it we're not being represented. We're not being represented in important discussions and important decisions, decisions that governments are making that just would not have been made if we were better represented there. So I think we as women have just got to stop being positive, patient and polite about it and start, every time we see a number that isn't 50%, I think we need to question it. And, when anyone who follows me knows that if anyone ever celebrates having 30% of women on their boards, I get livid. How is that a celebration when it's nowhere near 50%?
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing that I would say that I'd love to see is, to all the men, is be feminists, as I say. We really need men. I mean, they've got over 90% of the power in the world. They've got the positions. They're making over 90% of the decisions in business and in the world. If they don't buy into this, we're getting nowhere. We're going to get nowhere. So we need men on board, and we need to talk with them in a way that gets them on board and keeps them on board. And I think we don't always do that because we're angry and we're frustrated. I think we've got to, have constructive conversations about this and remind them they're going to win. They're going to win from this.
So you get to win too.
It's not a charity. It's business. They will win. They'll win personally. They'll win socially. They'll win at work if it's more equal. So
you couldn't have said it better.
Convert them one by one.
Absolutely. And please remember, we're going to have 70% of the wealth for the next 2 generations, and we make 80% of the purchasing decisions. So no matter how much we're paid, how much power we do or don't have officially, we've got monetary power coming out our ears if we just use it. That's what purse power is about.
I love that.
Thank you so much for being here today. I sure appreciate it. That was a terrific conversation. And Melanie, thank you for sponsoring Mosaic. We appreciate you. Just for reference, guys, we've got some terrific guests. I want to go through it really quickly. So Karen Tracy, she has won the International Adrienne Hall Award for breaking down barriers, awarded by the Women Presidents Organization. She's next Friday. We've got a couple of people with global procurement practices. I've got the top 100 most influential women in supply chain coming on July 23rd. And then we have our networking session on July 30th. So please come back. We do this every Friday, and we post our speakers for the upcoming Friday every week on our website, which is pursepower.com. Okay, any final words of wisdom from you or Melanie? Anything else you want to say?
I think I've said enough, but I'd love to hear some wisdom from Melanie.
Oh. Hello. No, I just was glued to every word you said. I just appreciate meeting you, Gill. And I'm I would love to buy your book for all of my, all the ladies on our team.
There you go. Here it is. Why Men Win at Work.
Fantastic. Well, do let me know what you think. I always love to hear everyone's thoughts. The conversation is what will move us forwards. Yeah. And the purse power.
Yes, absolutely. There you go. Remember, purse power. We have it. Let's use it. Okay. See you next Friday, everybody.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Donna,
you.
Melanie, and everyone. Thanks for having
Bye.
me.
Appreciate it. Okay. Bye-bye.